Good morning. Happy Memorial Day and happy Pentecost. Just like to say what beautiful music there was this morning. Thank you for that. And I would have sung along with you, but I do want you to invite me back. So I want to listen to you, so thank you. I appreciate the very kind and warm welcome this morning. It's truly a privilege to be with you here today as we remember Americans' fallen heroes. It is appropriate that we take time to reflect upon the sacrifice that so many of our fellow Americans have made on our behalf. Across the country today and throughout this weekend, parents are going to be with their children at parades. We're going to be at the lake fishing or at the beach. However, at the forefront of our minds should be what Memorial Day is all about. Memorial Day is special. It is one day a year that Americans reserve the honor for those who have made the ultimate sacrifice so that we may be free to enjoy this special weekend, other weekends, and as a matter of fact, every day of our lives in this free country. Today is a day to remember what others have done for us. Americans who have fought and died so this country can be protected and prosper. We thank God for giving us men and women like these who go into harm's way knowingly they may not return. In November of 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, a war that had torn this nation apart, President Abraham Lincoln went to the battlefield of Gettysburg, where nearly 8,000 men were killed and more than 27,000 men were wounded, and he delivered his Gettysburg Address. In his brief remarks that day, 4 months after the great battle that historians consider the turning point of the restoring of the Union, President Lincoln said, "The way to honor our dead who die on battlefields is to increase the devotion to their cause." He said, "It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which gave them the full measure of devotion, that they were highly resolved that these dead shall not die in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from this earth." Lincoln made those remarks at a time of great peril to our country. At the end of the war, the Union was restored at the cost of more than 600,000 men. The first Memorial Day was proclaimed on May 5th, 1868 by General John Logan, and it was first observed on May 30th in 1868. It was observed by the placement of flowers on graves of Union and Confederate soldiers. 81 years later, in June 1944, during another time of great peril to our nation, American soldiers stormed beaches in Normandy, France. Thousands died. Thousands more were wounded. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines freed a continent. By August 1945, the Empire of Japan was also defeated, and the world once again took a deep breath of freedom. That's what Americans do. Americans confront evil when we see it, and then we defeat it. We shouldn't kid ourselves. Evil is very patient, and it lies in wait to exploit any weakness of those who are free. We as a free nation must always be vigilant and let our strength also be our shield. In these years that followed World War II, America helped rebuild Europe and Japan. Americans do that too. Americans are good people, generous people, benevolent people. Americans have a history of coming to the aid of others, sometimes at the expense of our own needs and priorities. Our country has sacrificed much so that others may also live in freedom and liberty. Americans we honor today have paid the ultimate price. The least we can do is remember them, thank them, and honor their memories for their selfless sacrifice. Today is a day of reverence. Each of us here today should remember those who have gone before us, our family members, our loved ones, our neighbors, and our friends, who, when their country called, were there and gave all they had, their lives. Our nation has been built upon acts of heroism and sacrifice. Just last week, we honored those that died that while serving with the Merchant Marine. And this particularly harrowing and touching incident involves a convoy of 3 ships and 3 escorting Coast Guard cutters passing through Torpedo Alley, some 100 miles off the coast of Greenland, at about 1 a.m. in the morning, February 3rd, 1943. The submarine U-223 fired 3 torpedoes, one of which hit the midsection of the Dorchester, a U.S. Army troop transport with more than 900 men on board. Ammonia and oil were everywhere in this fast-sinking vessel and upon the freezing sea. 4 chaplains on board, 2 Protestant pastors, a Catholic priest, and a Jewish rabbi were among first on the deck, calming the men and handing out life jackets. When they ran out, they took off their own life jackets, placed them on waiting soldiers without regard to faith or race. Approximately 18 minutes after the explosion, the ship went down. The chaplains were last seen by witnesses standing arm in arm on a capsized hull of the ship, each praying his own way for the care of the men. Out of 900, almost 700 died, making this the 3rd largest loss of sea of its kind for the United States in World War II. Today, there is a stained glass window dedicated to these 4 brave patriots at Fort Snelling in St. Paul. More than 1 million American service members have died in our nation's wars and conflicts, beginning with the colonial soldiers back in 1775 to fight for our independence against overwhelming odds. For more than 2 centuries, service members have died so that we can live our lives in peace. We take so much for granted. Our attention span for many Americans today is very short. So quickly we forget why we ask our servicemen and women and their families where they have gone. We send the young people off in faraway lands with the intent of securing safety here at home. We send them to the remotest parts of the world, and unfortunately, we lose focus on why they are there and what they are doing in our behalf. Each of these heroes is owed a great debt. It is not a debt we will see on any balance sheet. It's not a debt, regrettably, that can ever be repaid. All we can do is ensure that their sacrifice is not done in vain, and vow that we will continue to carry forward the torch of freedom on their behalf. As a grateful nation, we must renew our resolve that their sacrifices will never, ever be forgotten. People ask me, what is the toughest part of being a congressman? For me, the answer is a tragically an easy one. The hardest part for me was trying to say the right words to comfort a father who had just lost his son in Afghanistan. It's heartbreaking. It's an impossible task. We must dedicate ourselves to preserving the dignity and to showing the deepest respect for our fallen soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines when they return home. President Ronald Reagan once said, speaking of our dead, we must always remember that peace is a fragile thing that needs constant vigilance. We owe them a promise to look at the world with a steady gaze and perhaps a resigned toughness, knowing that we have adversaries in the world and challenges, and the only way to meet them and maintain the peace is by staying strong. President Reagan's words have been summarized as peace through strength. We must stay strong if we truly care about peace. I know that many of you here today have either actively are serving or have served, whether it was during World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, or wherever it may have been. We thank you for your dedication and service to this great country. In closing, this is the day our nation mourns the loss of our men and women in uniform. We will continue to honor them by completing the mission for which they gave their lives, to protect freedom from oppression, to lay the foundation of peace for the next generation of Americans. Today we pray for those who lie in graves here, on foreign soils, or in the ocean depths. We are unwavering and resolved that their sacrifice will always be remembered by a grateful nation. Thank you again for the kind invitation to being here today. May God bless our troops abroad. May God bless the great state of Minnesota. And may God bless our country. Thank you.